Hi.
Yeah, I see some people coming in from all over the place. So it's going to be, I'm very excited for this show today. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And so let's just jump in actually, since I see people already are on. So Tori, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Tori Samples, and I am the co-founder and chief technology officer of Leaf Global FinTech, which is a new startup that helps refugees and migrants to store and move their money across borders. So really looking at this problem of not being able to move your money conveniently when either you're traveling across countries or you have friends and family that are trying to send and receive money digitally without carrying cash. And starting in Rwanda.
That's awesome. Yeah, so we see a lot of people are coming in. Yeah, I like that intro. So tell us more about your journey. Actually, how did you end up in Rwanda?
Sure. And you and I have talked a little bit about this. It's a bit of a winding journey,
Yeah.
but very, very happy that it led me to where I am today. So I have a bit of a non-traditional background. My degree is actually in music. I play the harp, and so I have a degree in harp performance. And then I went into IT. That's how I got into technology. My first job out of college got me into that quite accidentally. And then I ended up really loving it. And so I did that for a number of years, went back to business school to get out of technology, and then ended up sticking with it because I liked it so much. Um, and and then while I was in business school, started working on this business concept. And my background personally, I have lived in Tanzania before. I was working in healthcare clinics, taught English in Zanzibar, have a lot of connections to East Africa through
Mm.
my family, my church, my community that I grew up in. And so it seemed like a really natural step, but it was definitely not expected. So I think we'll probably talk a little bit more about that in
Oh yeah.
detail. But I've been traveling. Well, I've been based in Rwanda full time since last July. And then before that, I was traveling back and forth between the US and Rwanda for about a year and a half.
All right. Um, yeah, I was trying to get. There is a video. I got a video from your company, and I was trying to actually show it. Oh no, no, never mind. It's not the right one.
Looks like a
Yeah,
good video.
it's not working. It's not working out the way. I Yeah, I was trying to basically surprise you with the video from your website, but
Nice.
but yeah, it didn't work out. Instagram. So yeah, so let's just keep going. So like, tell us a little bit about that journey to Rwanda, because some people might be like, how do you go from the US and decide to
Mm-hmm.
relocate to Rwanda? Um, like, tell us a little bit about before even that, like, how did you come to that conclusion?
Sure. Well, everybody who's been to Rwanda knows it's a nice place. So anybody who has seen it can probably understand why someone would want to live there.
Yeah.
But maybe for people who want to know a bit more about that journey, um, so Rwanda was a very strategic position for us with the company. And that's really how I ended up there. We chose Rwanda because we're working with refugees and migrants and cross-border traders. So in that sense, it has a lot of business activity and movement across the region. So it's very strategic from that vantage point. And then the country itself is so pro technology, pro business. You know, it's very, very easy to start a business in Rwanda comparatively. I think that, you know, being in Rwanda, it's a smaller market, you know, more regulated. It has its challenges, but overwhelmingly, it's a really great place to start. And so, my co-founder Nat Robinson and I started looking at this, as I mentioned, while we were in graduate school. He was in law school, I was in business school, and we met through a pitch competition about the refugee crisis several years ago. And so we started looking at it from a very research oriented lens. And we ended up coming up with a different idea for that, but it got us thinking about this. And he had lived in Kenya for 7 years. He ran a microfinance company there, so also very familiar with this area. And then when we started looking at East Africa and the migration patterns, the mobile money infrastructure, the regulation, all of it just kind of started pointing to Rwanda. And so we did our first pilot, our first test in March of 2018, just with a very basic product came out and tested on the border of Gisenyi and Goma, and found it was such an overwhelmingly positive experience that we decided, okay, this business really has potential here, and this is the right environment to make it work. And so then after that, that's when we started traveling back and forth more, and then eventually it was like, well, I'm spending more time in Rwanda than the U.S., so it probably makes sense to be here. But it's also, I mean, it's great to really be able to invest in the community, that you're trying to serve, and get to know your customer base really well, and be all in as an entrepreneur.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask a little bit about your, you mentioned when we were talking before about your early investment, or like even connection with the refugee community, even when you were still young from home. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It's a really important part of my life, and the reason that I wanted to do this business. Our thesis, or our mission, is very much that you can make positive impact in the world through sustainable business. But on the personal side, I'm very passionate about it because I've been involved in the resettled refugee community since 2004 in the US. Originally got involved through the church, and started to get to know the South Sudanese community in Kentucky, which is where I'm originally from. There's a large, strong community there, and so through that experience, this community, these people, it's like they became my family. Like I don't know what else to call them. It's like you're there for each other, and you go through really great experiences together, and really, really challenging experiences together. And so through that, and through so many years of investing in that community, I saw the challenges that refugees still experience, even when they're part of the very small, lucky number that gets resettled to a place like the United States. It's still an uphill journey. And so it was, it's just part of my life. It's my community. It's my neighbors. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for about 11 years, and we have a very strong Congolese community there. So I also got involved there. That, again, I lived in that neighborhood. These are just my people. And so I think I've seen what that can look like along the whole spectrum after resettlement. And the challenges that I saw over and over again are that, unfortunately, people's financial health just determines everything else about their life. It kind of all comes back to money. And you and I talked about this. I wish that it didn't. I wish that it was solved through something like healthcare, education, healthcare technology being my background. I think that's it's a nicer story to be able to work on. You give somebody an education and it changes their life, but it's like, well, the reality is that a lot of people just need access to their own money and money from friends and family to get a head start, to get a good start in their new life. And then if they can get that, they can get the healthcare, they can get the education, they can succeed. But without that, it's really, really challenging. And so, yeah, very, very, very personally passionate about this community and the challenges that they face. And that's kind of what led me to be where I am today.
Okay. That's very interesting, because I love hearing like people's journeys, how they end up to where they ended up. And speaking of that, you just mentioned something about how everything boils down to money. And I was wondering, for someone who's trying to start their own business in Rwanda, what can you advise them to how to get money about that?
Yeah, that is a really challenging one. my co-founder and I like to joke that, you know, if we could just do it all again, we would just start with a lot of money. Fundraising is very challenging. And, you know, even I think it's easier for me as an American because I have access to American networks and American resources in addition to Rondan resources being in market and context. But I think that I would say to other entrepreneurs, don't underestimate the role of fundraising in your business, but also keep a very open mind. Your fundraising path has to match your business path. And so if you're trying to start a company that is local and starting as a small business and then maybe growing, you don't need to go after Shark Tank money, right? You need a small start. You probably need help from friends and family just to get that going. And I would say for anyone, you know, try to make money as soon as possible. Try to shorten that time period that you're relying upon outside funding. But for most people, yeah, you do need some external help. But yeah, I would say get creative. We've used resources from different universities, including Carnegie Mellon Africa in Kigali. Student resources have helped a bunch. We've looked at grants. If you can name a fundraising path, odds are that we've looked at it. And some are more successful than others. But I think, you know, it's just don't underestimate the time that you're going to have to put into that.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of people think it's easy to get money, or like they don't go through all different like valuable options, competitions and stuff like that. What would you advise people like who are trying to do that, like because like it should take a long time to do the whole fundraising process. So,
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I do think it's different for every person, but we, for example, we raised all of our early money on pitch competitions. So it was easier, I think, for us because we were still in school, so we had access to some things through that. But yeah, we definitely used the resources of our university, and then we looked into, I mean, pitch competitions all over the world to see what we might be eligible for. We still apply to a lot of things that, you know, it's like we put it out there and you never know. You just never know what comes back. And so we did it that way. Because of our social impact angle, we've been eligible for a lot of grants, which has been helpful. I think, you know, free money or grant money is always a great way to test your business concept. But I'd say just generally with fundraising, no matter who you're fundraising from, it's all about the traction and the progress that you can show. So just make sure that, you know, you improve your own chances as much as possible by having the most mature product and business concept as you can. Because even if you have a great pitch or you've got connections to a lot of people, nobody wants or nobody's going to invest in something that isn't a sustainable, profitable business. And so, you know, make sure that you've got the fundamentals right, the foundation is good, and then after that, you know, work on how you message that.
All right. Actually, you just mentioned something interesting, but before we go into what I'm about to say, for the people just joining right now, you can ask your questions and we'll get to them later on. You can also use the question tag, so it's easier for me to find them. But yeah, so coming back to you, so you mentioned how like even about the pitches and everything, like you go through the competitions. So I went and found one of your pitch deck, and I found it online. So I would like to go through it a little bit, like so to kind of have like an interactive exercise to help. First of yeah, let me see.
Oh, nice. Where did you find this? I'm wondering how old it is.
I don't know. I think it was from It's from probably last year. I don't know, but you can confirm it's yours, right?
Oh yeah, no, that's ours. That's our branding.
Yeah. So yeah. So I want to basically to help someone who's trying to use to go to a competition. Like, what should they have in their pitch deck?
Yes, this is great. This is actually a wonderful surprise because this is something I am very passionate about is helping people communicate their messages clearly. And not to say that we do it perfectly at Leaf. We're every time we do it, we've probably done this pitch, hundreds and hundreds of times, and we're still improving it every single time. But there are certain things that every entrepreneur can do to help communicate their message clearly. So the deck that you have up, it's a fairly recent one. I think there have been some updates since that, but this is what we call our written deck. So the first thing I would say to an entrepreneur is know your audience and know the format, because this, like the slide that you have up right now, is really helpful if you email this to someone. But if you're presenting, nobody wants to see all of that text on the screen. So even things like that, make sure that you've got your presentation deck for a pitch competition or a conversation with someone, and then you've got your written deck that you can send later that stands on its own. So some of the things that I would say about the pitch deck generally, then there are a lot of resources on this that people can find online, but I think it's always helpful to have the problem and the solution laid out very clearly at the beginning. You definitely have to have how the business makes money. Make sure that people absolutely understand that one, and then how you're different from anything in the United States. That are you back? There we go. Yeah.
Yes.
So most of the time we're pitching to people who might not have a good context for East Africa or for mobile money. And so we have to do some explaining to say, okay, what is mobile money and how are we different than mobile money? For someone who isn't familiar with the mobile money system, it can be mind-blowing in a good way. It's like, oh wow, this technology has been around for 10 years. How did we not know about this? And so we have to set the context, but all of that leads into how big the market is. And I think that's always the one that, even if like us, you have to do a bit more explaining to get your audience there, you have to cast that vision to show them, okay, where are we going with this? It might be small today. It might be the first version of the product today. But if we can get this going, what is the opportunity? And if you can sell them on the opportunity, then, I mean, that's the biggest hurdle. You can always address the risks and the challenges and everything. But if you can't sell that vision to them, then you won't even get the chance to answer the specific questions.
Yes, I'm trying to go through so it can help, because I know like this is it's more like a complex conversation, because most people have like whatever they're working on, but they can't lay it down or sell it better to people they want to get money from. So this can definitely help them a lot to make a better presentation.
And there are some things, some tips and tricks just with the visuals, the formatting. It conveys a certain level of professionalism. So I would say, the design and the graphics, it's not the most important thing. It does not determine the success of your business, but there's a certain level that's, if you can't make your presentation, if you can't make your slide deck look professional, then you'll never get a chance to have the conversation. So, make sure that the little things like the formatting and the graphics and the text don't hurt you in the process.
Okay. Yeah, actually, that makes a valid point, because I think it's more like like once you graduate, like your grades determine whether you get the interview, but when you get to the interview, it's a whole other process. So yeah, so that sounds like very interesting. Let me see. I'm trying to see if there is, because I saw some questions. We could just take one question very quick. Yeah, what do you say about someone mentioned how people in Rwanda should have more jobs and as to develop the country? Like, what do you think about that? Like the employment and
Yeah.
whole community.
Yes. No, that's a really important one. And our goal is definitely to provide more jobs in all of our markets. So yes, definitely starting in Rwanda. The model that we've been working with, I mean, we have our local team, and so we've got local tech, we've got local market support, we've got local people helping us engage with communities, both refugees and cross-border traders, which are kind of our two primary customer segments. But then also, I think the really exciting opportunity with our business model is that we're trying to provide some form of almost like semi-employment for people who are using our services. So if people are familiar with Uber or Move or anything like that, where it's kind of a semi-employment, where if you have a smartphone or you have a car, you can become a driver for Uber. Anyone who uses the Leaf app can almost become like a Leaf agent. It's not the same as an MTN agent, not to that level, but you can register other people for Leaf and provide some limited customer support. And so in that sense, we're trying to engage our users, not just as customers, but really bring them into the Leaf community and help provide jobs. Especially, our goal for this is to do that really in refugee camps where you have young people who are really smart and they're good with technology, they have a smartphone, and this is it's a nice way for them to start maybe earning some money on the side or getting some professional experience, and just using the assets and the resources that they have to do that.
Okay. Also, speaking of like talent, in some companies are afraid to come into Africa or in Rwanda because they don't think there's enough talent. What can you say about that?
Well, they're wrong. And no, I think, yeah, talent is always a challenge for any company. It doesn't matter what type of business you're starting. Nobody has all of the network and the resources that they need at first. So you have to grow that, of course. But I think that we have found really, I mean, Rwanda's a small country. We all know that. So the talent market is smaller. But I think that overall we've been really impressed with the quality of people that we found in Rwanda. So you might have to look a little bit harder because you don't have as many people. But yeah, we've had no significant issues with that. And if anything, it's been great because everyone that we've hired, they know the context so well, and so it makes them much more effective than if we were to try to bring someone from Silicon Valley or some of the big tech startups. It's like, yeah, they might have the technology skills that we need, but they don't know the market. They don't know how people use the product. They haven't used it themselves. We use USSD, the technology that mobile money runs on with short codes. And so that's wonderful for us. It makes it so that Leaf does not require a smartphone to use our services. But go tell someone in San Francisco that they can access all of these financial services without relying on an internet connection or smartphone, and they don't understand because we just don't use that technology. So I think that you have to be dedicated to finding the right people, but geography is not a limiting factor for that, at least not for us.
Okay. What about geography being limiting, as in convincing that the fund whenever you're fundraising the money, how do you find like investors are open to investing in other markets outside, or even with products that they have never used, like mobile money and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
How do you, yeah, go about with that challenge?
That's another good question. Um, as I said, there is some education involved, but I think that generally people are open. It does help, I think, that for fundraising purposes, we have a US entity, so we have a US company. And so if we find people that are only comfortable actually sending funds into a US company, we can accommodate that. And so that's definitely a resource that helps us a lot. But just on the attitude side, maybe, I think that we've been very intentional. You know, we don't want people to invest in our company who are scared of Africa or who don't understand what we're doing, right? That's helpful to get money in the door, maybe, but it's not very helpful in the long term because that's not the right fit for our business. So it's pretty easy to tell when somebody has fears or an attitude that would not be compatible with our model. It's easy to tell that within the course of a conversation. But I think what we found is that most investors are very open to learning, and they're excited about the opportunities. You know, with everything going on in Africa right now, and Rwanda being the fastest growing economy, there's so much opportunity, and people see that. People recognize it. They don't necessarily know how to get into it, but they want to be there. And then I think add on for us that we are doing some really interesting work with blockchain, and these high technologies. It's a very exciting space to be in. And so I think we're able to get people over that education hurdle. But of course, better if they're familiar with it already.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you recommend for people trying to fundraise more money? Like, do they have to go outside? Like, what do you think about the fundraising in the region?
Yeah, it's difficult. You and I talked a bit about the UN report that came out last year that showcased all of the fintech startups in Rwanda, and most of them have not been able to raise money locally, at least at an institutional level. Most have been funded exclusively by friends and family, which is great. I mean, it speaks to the generosity of people and the investment in the community, but oftentimes it's not enough. So I think we have found more success raising money outside of Rwanda, but that might be difficult, or it might be different if we were Rwandan. And so I'd say just again look into whatever resources you have. I do think that we're seeing a lot more activity coming, and that's been led by a lot of activity in Kenya and Uganda over the last 5 to 10 years. And so I think we're hopeful that more and more investors will not just invest in Africa, but actually be based out of Africa, and we'll see more African funds. But yeah, I think I would just do your research, do your homework. There are resources out there, especially to support local people doing good things in their context, but it might just take a little bit longer to find.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about now your product and what it can help someone who might be following us right now, who's like, what's the product for them? What does your product do?
Sure. Before that, I'm going to add one note on what I just said. I also would not overlook the impact of accelerator programs. That's a really easy way to get looped into the fundraising networks in Rwanda and around East Africa. There are great co-working spaces in Kigali that have all the latest information on who's doing what. I mean, even like the Google Launchpad program, but some smaller ones as well. Those are really helpful and can help entrepreneurs connect with local resources. So didn't want to overlook that one.
Yeah.
But now, yeah, so the product, and this is where I get excited because it's all the technology.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, our product allows people, as I said, to store and transport their money across borders. What that actually looks like is we have a smartphone application and a USSD application for feature phones. And with that, people can access a digital wallet that is theirs, and they can hold their money in the currencies that we support. So currently, we're in Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. We have the technical capability to be in Nigeria. We haven't really done anything there, but they can hold currency in each of those local currencies in their wallet, and they can send and receive to friends and family, and sending within Leaf is always free. So if you want to send money to someone on Leaf, you can do that for free. You can exchange it into those different currencies, and you cash in and cash out through mobile money. So if you're in Rwanda and you have a mobile money account, then you would go into the Leaf product, either smartphone or USSD, and you would say, I want to deposit into my Leaf wallet from mobile money. So you just put in your number, and it initiates a request from mobile money into Leaf. And from there, you hold it or send it to friends and family in Leaf, and same with cash out. We're working on adding more flexible options to that, but starting with mobile money because it's such a great infrastructure. So basically, if you want to think about your mobile money wallet, your Leaf wallet is like a mobile money wallet that goes across all the countries that we support and across all the networks.
Okay. Can't wait to have all in all different places so people can, wherever they are, can have their own Leaf wallet and be able to access their money everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that slide that you just put up, we can walk through that. That's kind of the classic refugee use case, which is really where we started. And with that, it shows the journey of someone who's leaving their country. So if you are, just a normal person living your life, which is what happens to most refugees, something happens and then you have to go. It's not that anyone ever plans to or tries to become a refugee. Refugees are normal people, and so what we allow them to do is kind of prepare for that, if possible, have a safe place to store their money beforehand so that if they do have to leave their country, everything is ready. They don't have to worry about their money. They don't have to carry cash, which can be very dangerous, just expensive as well. Yeah. And then we hold their money while they're traveling so that they don't have to carry that cash. And then when they get to a new country, if they formally enter a refugee camp or not, they can access their money again and send that out to a new mobile money wallet. And in the meantime, friends and family can contribute into that wallet so that when they get to a safe place like Rwanda, then they have more money in their account. They can access those funds.
Okay. I'm hoping that everyone was able to understand how you can use it, because it's straightforward. So as long as they have a Leaf Global account and access the money across. Yeah, I'm trying to see through the slides. So when it comes to understanding your market and your market share, how do you do like competitive analysis? And I'm trying to get a little bit more technical, so to help like the more advanced entrepreneur who is trying to fundraise or to start their own journey. So how do you go through like that, like the kind of like analysis that you need to project and to present?
Sure. And I think I'd start by saying there are many, many different ways to come up with those numbers. So as an entrepreneur, be very real with yourself, because you can always make the numbers bigger than they are, or find a way to make it work on paper, but try to make it as realistic as possible so that you don't waste your own time and waste other people's. For us, the way that we looked at it is really starting with this refugee use case and knowing that the actual market is much bigger. We don't have any formal checkbox to say, are you a refugee? You know, we can serve anyone. We just thought that it was important to design for that use case because there's no existing product on the market for that customer segment today. They're very overlooked. So it's a very large customer segment that when you think about the competitive landscape, it's a wide open market. It's a close-knit community. They talk to each other, and it's open. So that means, you know, on paper at least, it's a very viable market. And that's when you have to start looking at the financials. And of course, all of that works out too, or we wouldn't be in this space. But if you look at just global statistics, there are about 70 million forcibly displaced people around the world, according to the UN. On top of that, there are another 100 million that are living on the verge of crisis. They could become refugees at any point. And then you start getting outside of refugees, and there are 500 million people in Africa alone that rely on cross-border trade for income. There are 2.4 billion people using feature phones around the world. There are 2 billion unbanked people around the world. These are all markets that we can serve. And it's very tempting to say, oh, you know, we can serve all of these people, and we will someday. But you have to be disciplined to start. You've got this big market globally. Where do you actually focus so that you can become successful and then scale? So for us, that was looking at the Rwanda, DRC, Uganda corridor and starting there. Looking at the refugees who have access to mobile money, because that's kind of a tech requirement for us. That's the cash-in mechanism, and then starting from there. So even within that group, we've really focused on Western Rwanda and the cross-border traders and the refugees there.
Yeah, and how important is it to do your market segmentation right and to get your understanding your customers?
Extremely, yeah. And that's again an area where, as much work as we do, there's always more to be done. There's always more ways to understand your customer base, and you have to keep talking to them, because right when you think you have a good understanding, things change. You know, even with COVID, you know, we thought a really good understanding of our market, and then, well, the borders closed. What do? You have to get to know your customer segment again and see how they're responding to these new challenges and these new needs. And so I think, you know, for us, we did a lot of time with customer discovery. And I see Connor on here. I'm going to give him a shout out really quick. He just joined. He was part of the original team that went out and did market research a couple summers ago in 7 different countries. So before we had decided even on East Africa, my co-founder Nat sent people out to Latin America and East Africa and Southeast Asia, looking to see the needs of people across the world and how similar they were. And yes, what came out of that is that people do have a lot of the same challenges around the world, at least with not being able to store and transport their money digitally. And so that's kind of when we started boiling down into the mobile money infrastructure and the network that we had. But we ended up doing just in Rwanda and Congo and Uganda, I think 350 customer interviews. That's sitting down with people and talking through, like with cross-border traders, okay, what exactly do you trade? And how many times do you go across the border per week? And how much money do you carry? And how much money is stolen? And, you know, what are the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis? Getting to that level with people is extremely important, because that's when you start to see how people solve the problem themselves. You know, what are the workarounds that they do? What are the challenges? And how can you make their lives better in that sense?
Yeah. That's very something interesting you mentioned, because it's some people don't do enough research or don't get to the actual customer to talk to them, or to do more like personal research, and that can affect everything in their business when it's their message not getting across. So that's very great. Like, for someone who's still starting out, and you mentioned how like the kind of evolves with time, or your company evolves to serve different sets of customers. Um, how is that been so far with your company? Like, yeah, you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think COVID has definitely been the biggest game changer. Nobody anticipated that, of course, and so that's been the biggest one that we've been thinking about. Okay, how do we pivot? How do we adapt our model to be able to continue to serve our customers when the conditions have changed? How do we reach our customers? That's been a big one for us. Most of our operations are virtual, so we don't need a lot of people on the ground supporting. But in the past, our customer registration has been mostly in person. And that's because people are more comfortable with that in our customer segments. They like that human connection. But then also it is easier and it helps with the risk piece of things as well. So the know your customer requirements. It's easier if you have another person seeing, okay, this is a real person here in front of me and I know who they are. But we've had to adapt that. And so we've spent a lot of time over the last couple months looking at removing the in-person requirements for every part of our business so that even under lockdown, even with the borders closed, we can continue to serve people. I think that one of the really great things that has come out of the pandemic is the surge in mobile money registration and usage. So that's been a really nice one for us. Spent time looking at, okay, now there are all these new mobile money users. How do we entice them to bring more money through mobile money onto the Leaf platform?
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's a little bit rainy. I'm not sure if it's like making a lot of sound here, but just making sure people are sorry for that.
All good.
Okay, trying to go through again some questions. Yeah. Oh, how I saw something about how do you identify your uh, business environment in Rwanda? Or basically, yeah, I guess how do you find your market? I think we've gone through a little bit of that, but I mean, if you want to talk a little bit more about that, like finding your market in Rwanda, yeah, you can.
Sure. So again, anyone who has been in Rwanda knows the challenges and the opportunities of running a business in Rwanda. It's you have to do everything right. You know that you have to pay your taxes. You have to go through all the paperwork, but that's okay, right? I mean, it's very well controlled. It's very pro technology. So I think that we've found it to be a good environment, especially for starting. We want to do everything the right way. So adhering to the regulation, making sure that our product and our business is in good standing with the local laws and policies and regulation, it's all good for us. So it's more challenging than if we had started somewhere else, but that's okay. We wanted that, and I think it makes us more sustainable as we scale into other countries. I think Rwanda also comes with some credibility. So, you have to always convince people that if you've done it in Rwanda, that you can do it in other countries, because they'll say, oh, Rwanda is just a small country. So can you really do it in a place like Kenya or Tanzania or DRC? So we have to get over that challenge with people. But I do think there's some credibility to say, okay, if you've managed to make it work in Rwanda, then you can do it in other places because you've set it up to be compliant. You've set it up the right way.
Yeah, that's definitely something I hear about for especially businesses coming from abroad. Like they get satisfaction of setting it right in Rwanda and kind of expand from there. So also for someone who's trying to scale their businesses, especially in other markets outside the country, what are the biggest challenges they get? Because I feel like some countries, when you go to another place, it might be like starting over, or I don't know, like how do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, and that's a place where I think it really just depends on the nature of your business.
Mm,
You know, Leaf was designed from the very beginning to be global. You know, we joke sometimes. It's like, well, the end goal is world domination, right? We want to be in every country so that anyone can safely bring their money with them wherever they go in the world. They can have access to their money. So, in that sense, our vision is to be in every country. When you think about the scale and how to make a business scale like that, it almost has to be digital first. You know, you can't go build an infrastructure in every country. Western Union has been able to do that, but it took them 169 years. So
wow.
I
Yeah.
don't have 169 years left to live right now,
Yeah.
and definitely not to go build a physical presence in all of these countries.
Mm,
Um, and so I think for us, it's been looking at, you know, how do we do this quickly and effectively, and that's always been through technology. And with some of the breakthroughs, not just in the blockchain space, but just with um, cloud-based infrastructure and access to technology, bandwidth, and broadband, and all of this in so many countries around the world, that's made life a whole lot easier for us. And so part of it is just timing. You know, if we had tried to start this business 20 years ago,
okay.
it wouldn't have been possible. But now we're coming in with new technology and taking advantage of some of the latest trends in order to do that. So I think, you know, for somebody who's looking at expanding into other countries, make sure that it aligns with your vision for your company first. And then second, figure out what is the minimum that you would have to do to expand into that country. Not all countries are going to be a good fit, especially if you're in a space like us, you know, with fintech that is heavily dependent upon regulation and local policies. You have to make sure that that's a good fit
Uh,
with your business model and with your product and services.
okay. Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. Um, trying to see if there's something else I might. Uh, by the way, for the people who are still coming in, yeah, please leave your questions using the question tag or through the comment section. I don't see anything currently. I think we went through most of them. But yeah, if there's something else, let me see. And anything else you might want to add to, especially like recruiting and the language barriers and all that, has that been an issue, or like trying to add on to your talent, and has that been a problem?
Well, I'm very willing to admit that my Kinyarwanda is not good. I'm trying trying to learn, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm very thankful that you know, with our team at least, everyone else speaks English, so that does make it a lot easier. I speak Swahili. I thought that would be maybe a little bit more helpful in Rwanda from my time in Tanzania, but on a day-to-day basis, no. I mean, it's a little bit more relevant when you get out to the border of DRC, and that's been really nice to have that mix, you know, of Swahili and French and everything that's out there. But I don't think that it's been a huge barrier for us, you know, especially because English has become the language of tech in many countries, and so especially when we're looking for developers, I think that it hasn't been so much of a problem. Um, and you know, I've been really impressed with just I mean, everyone in Rwanda speaks a lot of languages,
Yeah.
seemingly. And so it really, even in the more rural parts, it hasn't been a huge issue for us. But I think that, you know, eventually it would be great if we could get to the point where, you know, we're hiring people in lots of different languages, again, as we get into other markets. But so far, not a huge issue.
Okay. And have you had an opportunity to use your Swahili, or even in the other markets?
So it's interesting. Well, you know, you've probably heard the joke about you know, Tanzanian Swahili is the good Swahili, and depending on which country you're from, Swahili was born in Tanzania and then went to some other country and grew up and went to some other country and died. And I won't name those countries because they tend to switch depending on where you're from.
Mm.
But I think everyone knows, Congolese Swahili is very different than Tanzanian Swahili. So it's been fun to learn. Sometimes it's frustrating because it's like, well, that's not the word that I know for that. What is this? And
Mm.
it's like I don't speak the same language at all. But I think it's definitely helpful when you're trying to get to know people, and trying to communicate with them just on a human level, especially your customers. It's like I value you, and we're together, right?
Mm.
And we can't communicate perfectly, but just making some effort helps a lot. And so I think it's been really fun. Also, people, of course, are surprised, when my co-founder and I show up and we're able to speak to them a bit in Swahili. They're like, what is this? So that's just fun. But yeah, the Swahili over there is very much French and locally influenced. So it's kind of a mix, which is really fun because you hear a sentence and it's got like some Swahili word and some French word and some
Um,
English, computer or something like that. And you're like,
yeah.
well, my brain doesn't know how those things work together, but I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's a really fun place to be for sure.
Yeah. Someone just, Olivier Massa mentioned, asked with the U.S. entity to raise money. So basically, they're trying to connect the U.S. entity
Mm-hmm.
and run this entity.
Got
What?
it. Yeah, reading.
How hard or easy is that?
Um, I mean, it's easy to set up a business in Rwanda. The government makes that great. Oh, hi from Tanzania. Great. Nobody. Um, so yeah, the government makes it very easy to set up a Rwandan entity. That's the good news. We we originally had a U.S. entity and a Rwandan entity that were separate, and we participated in a program that was investing in us, and they basically said, we'd be more comfortable investing in the U.S. entity because that's the way we have all the processes set up, and so we ended up moving our Rwandan entity to be a subsidiary of the parent U.S. entity. And I think that has made investors more comfortable. And so that's not always an option to everyone. Again, that's definitely made easier because we are American, but I would say that it's made investors more comfortable. I would also say for anyone who has access to good lawyers and good accountants, I can't give enough appreciation to our lawyers and accountants because they have saved us a lot of trouble. And I mean, as anyone operating a business in Rwanda knows, you have to be very careful, especially about your taxes,
Mm.
just because the penalties can be high for not doing that right. So yeah, we do local taxes and all of that, even though technically now the Rwandan entity is underneath the parent entity in the U.S.
Okay. Hopefully, Olivier has had is happy about that. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Here is another one. How could you determine the profit success of starting a company in Rwanda? I think they're asking how how profitable has your company been in Rwanda after 5 years or something like that?
Yeah, we're still very very early. Technically, we are technically live, but we have not done like a full scale launch. We've done a closed beta, and that was great. That was really successful. We were happy to see people using the product and telling their friends and family about it. But we're still very very early, and so we have high hopes for the profitability in Rwanda in the next 5 years. We would not be based there if we didn't. It does, it comes down to the economics, the unit economics of that. But yeah, I think we see Rwanda as a viable market. Otherwise, we wouldn't be there. But we also, our model is inherently cross border. So we don't really break it down by country, because our customers are moving between countries, and so we kind of look at it more as a market. So we're looking at the countries that we're live in today, and the movement between Rwanda and Uganda and Kenya and DRC and all of these countries that we support.
All right. Okay, here is another one. Oh. What tools can you point out have been helpful? Did you have to change your workflow? I'm not exactly sure what question is talking about. Could you specify exactly what you're focusing on? What kind of tools for what? And let's go to another one in the meantime. Okay, the one, how are you benefiting from the project?
Oh, me personally. Do you think that's what that means?
I think so.
Well, um, I have I've been working on this now full time almost 2 years, and so it definitely was not where I expected to be. I expected to go back into healthcare after finishing business school. I had my life plan, and I was very happy with the plan. And then this opportunity came about, and so I'd say I have benefited personally. I mean, like as a person in a lot of ways, just in the experiences that I've been able to get in the last 2 years. The the people that I've met, the just incredible things I've been able to do, and some of that is very privileged. I've been able to travel a lot between all of these countries and meet business partners in Kigali and Kampala and Nairobi and Kinshasa and all of these places, and be exposed to the really cool things that are happening across the region. That is a big benefit to me personally, just to feel like I'm in the middle of this movement of interesting tech things that are happening, and to see how people are passionate about serving their communities in a lot of different ways. I have benefited a lot from our team. We have an incredible team in Rwanda and elsewhere, and just getting to know each person that's on our team and getting to walk with them and help lead them along the way has been beneficial to me. It is. I would say to any entrepreneur, and this is a pretty common piece of advice: if you're starting a business for the money, then that's probably not a good idea. The money is never going to match up to what you expect, and it's a whole lot easier to gain wealth and to make money, especially in the short term, just by going into a standard job, if that's an option to you. And so, I always encourage people to keep an open mind about entrepreneurship and to explore, because there's so many wonderful things that can come out of it to you personally, but especially in the short term, the money is probably not going to be there. So don't do it for the money. But everything else, I think, more than makes up for that. And another thing I just want to tag on to that, because we talked a bit about this last week. I think for my personal journey, I did not feel comfortable calling myself an entrepreneur before this. I would not have said that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not the big ideas person. I'm not the big visionary. That's very much my co-founder, and he's great at that. I'm more the detail-oriented, process-oriented, small things person, and I really like to execute. I like to get things done. Very task-oriented. But I think that I excluded myself from being an entrepreneur, and that's just not true. There are so many different types of entrepreneurs, and especially if you can find someone else or find a team to come alongside your strengths and complement that with their strengths, then don't count yourself out. Anyone can be an entrepreneur. Just because you're not the big Shark Tank person doesn't mean that there's not a place for you and not a place for your business and your skills.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, this is more personal. I think we'll talk about this in the how they can reach your stuff. Yeah. So this person was just wondering if you can recommend lawyers who basically help connect the entity.
I'm happy to do that. Maybe offline. I
Yes.
think was that Olivier? We can chat about that.
Yeah.
It takes.
Which brings me to this person, same kind of question. How can people reach you or reach the company?
Sure. So you can, well, we are not as active on social media as the Ronda Updates official account. No one is, but you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Leaf Global Tech, and you can follow us on LinkedIn as well. I think those are probably the best ways to get in touch with us. And we're always happy to talk. Always happy to hear from potential customers, partners, anybody else.
Yes. I'm actually typing that out so people can see.
Thanks.
Leaf Global.
Yeah, Leaf Global Tech.
Um,
And someday, when we all get back to meeting, we'd be very happy to meet up in person as well. Usually based in Kigali, but we spend a lot of time in Kibuye and a lot of time in Gisenyi. So if anybody's connecting from there, we'd love to get in touch with you.
Also, speaking of your, what else? Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Speaking of your market and segmenting, I wanted to ask a little bit. When you select a certain how, so most people struggle with trying to reach out to everyone at the same time instead of narrowing it down to like one specific niche and trying to go deep with that person. And how do you uh, connect that with loyalty and having like long-term customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so I think, if you look at any business, it is generally better to acquire customers and then be able to serve them over a long amount of time. That's going to be more cost effective and more profitable for your business. So it's definitely something that we think about. How do we not just get more customers onto the platform, but how do we keep them and support them well and increase their loyalty? That's one of the things that we think is really overlooked about the refugee segment specifically, because if you get into those communities, you'll find that people talk to each other all the time. It's really important, especially during that first journey. So if you think about it, it's a time with a lot of risk and a lot of vulnerability. And so they're reaching out to their friends and family members during that time and afterwards to say, hey, I'm okay. I made it to this point. This is where I am. This is how it's going. This is what I need. And those communication networks have value. And that's where we see it's an overlooked asset or an underutilized asset. And so that's one thing that we've been able to tap into, those word of mouth networks. And that's true locally and regionally, but all over the world. There are WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups with hundreds of people that all connect to each other. And so that's been important for us, just looking to see, what has value that other people might not see. That's been helpful. But then also, I think our business model specifically is aided by helping people during a very vulnerable time. So if you can serve someone during that time when no one else honestly wants to work with them, then you have acquired a very loyal customer. If you can say, hey, I know that the banks and the big institutions don't seem to care about you, but I do. And I think that you are worthy of being served as a customer, then that matters to people. It's all about seeing the dignity of every person and knowing that just because something has happened in your life, your circumstances have changed, doesn't mean that you are any less valuable or any less worthy of being served. So that's really important for us to communicate that to people. And that's true for the refugees, but also for cross-border traders, coming alongside them and helping them in their business and saying, hey, like this activity that you do to make a living for yourself is very important, and we want to help you do that better. We want to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, that you're not losing money as you support your family. I think if you can make people feel seen and heard and understood, then that's a way to increase loyalty within the customer base. And then there are all sorts of, tech tips and tricks that you can do to encourage people to use the platform and all of that to incentivize activity on the platform.
Yes. Also, talking about like the whole social entrepreneurship, some people try to attach something social to their businesses just to appear better to
Yeah.
Andre. What would you say to people like about adding a social element to their business model?
Well, if it works, of course, I always want to encourage intertwining social impact and business because I think that they can go very well together.
Mhm.
But if it's not motivated for the right reasons, then it's probably going to fall apart anyway. Entrepreneurship is hard. Um, you know, convincing people that you've got a big opportunity here is always difficult. And so adding more complexity to that through a fake social impact story, that's not going to last. But I think that there are always ways to make a positive social impact in any business. And so I would encourage everyone. I think just the point that we've reached in the world, not just with the very recent things with the pandemic, but just the kind of the global environment right now, I would encourage any entrepreneur to think about ways that their business can impact the world for good. I think any impact is better than not. And if entrepreneurs can be intentional about just even building in small things, then that's a wonderful thing to do for the world. And that will come through in your company culture and your fundraising and everything else. But it does absolutely have to be genuine. It's hard to fake that one.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's basically a good point to end the conversation before Instagram closes out. But if you would like to do some closing remarks, something you would like to tell every entrepreneurs around the world, like what would you tell them?
I am obviously just one perspective, one opinion, not
And
an expert, but I would say that I have learned a lot in the last couple of years, and I'm looking forward to learning more over the course of this. I would say anyone can be an entrepreneur, but everyone's journey will be challenging and difficult in its own ways. So make sure that you've got the strength and the support and the community to get through that. There are a lot of good ideas, but the ones that really succeed put everything into it and making sure that you do that in a sustainable way to your life and your family and your friends and everything. It's definitely challenging, but absolutely worth doing. And so for Leaf, I'd say we are so excited to really start serving not just people in Rwanda, but around the region and the world. And so I would welcome anyone who's watching this to get involved with us. We'd love to speak with you, get your opinion, and eventually serve you as a customer as well.
thank you so much.
Thank
Um,
you for having me.
oh, thank you, absolutely. So for the people, after this show will be available here on IGTV, and it will also be available on YouTube and different podcast platforms. So hopefully you get to reach out to Tori or to Lift Global from the contact information pinned below. You can reach out to them to Lift Global Tech at Lift Global Tech on social media, right? And liftglobaltech.com or
Yeah, leafglobalfintech.com.
yes, liftglobalfintech.com on their website. All right, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure to have you here, and I'm hopeful that every entrepreneur who are able to see this will take some different decisions about their business to make it better and impact more people socially and in their business. All right, thank you so much, Tori.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.
There are over 68 million refugees in the world today, and another 100 million living in crisis. Often their only option to hang on to savings when forced to flee is to carry cash, which is extremely dangerous, inconvenient, and expensive to exchange. Leaf Global FinTech provides financial services to refugees so that they don't have to carry cash while in flight. Leaf safely stores and transports assets across borders, all accessible through a mobile device, no smartphone required. Leaf converts mobile money through blockchain technology into stable investments that can be accessed no matter where a refugee goes or how long it takes to get there. By creating a virtual bank, Leaf eliminates the need to carry cash and the high fees associated with sending money across borders. Friends and family across the world can contribute into the customer's account. Blockchain plus biometric authentication make the platform extremely secure and transparent, in addition to being instantaneous and inexpensive. Leaf doesn't store value in cryptocurrency, so customers are hedged against volatility. At the same time, Leaf makes revenue like a bank. The Leaf team brings expertise across financial services, technology, and the refugee crisis, making them uniquely suited to solve this problem. Leaf ultimately creates an economic identity for customers, enabling economic security for the stateless and excluded. Visit leafglobalfintech.com to learn more about virtual banking beyond borders. There are over 68 million refugees in the world today, and